I'm so sorry.
I'm not audible.
No,
No,
comments are saying
you're
that you're not.
I'm not audible. Should I speak
Yeah,
loudly?
you're audible on the Zoom
There's
call
some
I'll be
though.
loud.
technical mistake. I think just 1 minute.
Yeah.
I can
I
hear him
am.
perfectly well. Yeah.
So I'm audible on the Zoom call, but not on YouTube. You say.
Right.
Yes.
Should I start again?
Uh, just
I think I'll begin again. I guess. That works out.
Yes, please go
I'll
ahead.
start again.
Yeah.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I think having been doing this for 2 or 3 times now, I'll just come straight to the point. Thank you so much for joining us. We're extremely grateful for your participation in the Pride Month webinar. We're thankful to Mr. Ashok sir, Mr. Anand sir, and our moderator Abhi sir, and to all the members who tuned in and made this event a success. Udriti, over to you for the introductions. Thank you so much, and let's have a great event. Thank you, everyone.
So the event is a collaborative effort of Lex Macula and the Parley Project. A little about the organizations. Lex Macula is a registered educational society. The vision at Lex Macula is based around equality of opportunity in the field of law. By creating a community of law students, all students are delivered an equal shot at growing and learning. We are a youth organization specializing in organizing moot courts, debates, seminars, and other legal competitions for a much better learning experience than what is offered to the law students. The most recent event was the second Lex Macula virtual moot court competition based on environmental law and vehicular pollution, which was one of the India's biggest moots with over 100 teams, both domestic and international. The two-day event culminated in a grand final round where one of the judges was legal crusader, senior advocate Geeta Luthra. Now, the Pali Project is a student-led initiative which focuses on research-driven solutions for global agendas. It is an endeavor to explore the intricacies of the increasingly globalized world and to unpack the politics behind the same. In perusal of our objectives, we recently organized a coffee conversation on the future of policy formulation with Mr. Alex Lefevre, who is a political officer at the US Embassy. Additionally, we have also addressed the future of sustainable development in the post-COVID reality and were privileged to host dignitaries from the medical and government fields as well. About the panelists, Mr. Anand Grover, sir, is a designated senior advocate practicing in the Supreme Court of India and is the director of the HIV/AIDS unit of the Lawyers Collective of India and the former special rapporteur of the United Nations on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of physical and mental health from 2008 to 2014. Amongst the numerous cases Sir has fought, one of the most important has to be when he represented the NAS Foundation. Mr. Ashok Row Kavi Sir is the founder and former chairperson of the Bombay-based LGBTQIA plus community rights NGO Humsafar Trust, which he started back in 1994. He has been a career journalist with a career spanning 2 decades. He was one of the first persons to publicly come out back in 1984. He is one of India's most senior and vocal gay rights activists and was one of the persons who filed the petition to water down Section 377 of the IPC. A moderator for the session is Mr. Abhi Sankret, who is a trans man activist who works very closely with the trans community in India. His group, the Happy Trans Man, has taken up a lot of initiatives for the trans men community in terms of skills enhancement, recruitment in trans-friendly organizations, weekly meetings on trans-relevant issues, and also counseling. He writes a blog on trans man issues as well. Abhi has studied English linguistics from University of Cambridge, and he works as a copy editor. He will moderate and give us a trans man perspective. I guess we can begin with the session.
Thank you so much, Diti. Now I'll ask Abhi sir to take over.
Yes. Thank you so much, Saharsh and Dhriti, for the introductions. And I also want to thank Lex Macula and the Parley Project for organizing this whole thing. I feel like really privileged to be on the same panel as Mr. Anand Grover and Mr. Ashok Kavi. I mean, this is really a great platform, and I feel very privileged to be on the same platform as them. From my side, a hello and a very warm welcome to all of you, everybody who is listening to us on the YouTube channel and the people who have joined us on Zoom. I welcome all of you on this avant-garde webinar. And why I called it avant-garde is because it's quite unconventional, a topic for law students. And before we even start it formally, I want to thank Lex Macula and the Parley Project for organizing it. And yes, my video is off. It's intentional. And it's to bring out the magnanimity of the social bias we as a community face. And today we are going to talk about the LGBTQ community, the ones who are treated awkwardly socially and in some unfortunate incidents disdainfully. And that's the most important reason why such platforms with such symposiums are necessary. As the openly gay American athlete Jason Collins once said, openness may not completely disarm prejudice, but it's a good place to start. And with that, I'll start today's webinar. My first question is to Mr. Kavi. Sir, considering the fact that a large section of our audience today is not from the community, why don't you explain the difference between sex, gender, and sexual orientation, sir? I know it's your second time, but yeah, please.
Okay. To all those who are listening, if you have a sheet of paper in front of you, please draw three circles that are practically touching each other, not three, four. And we can start on there. It's illustrative. I'm trying to be a teacher in a way, trying to give you the information in the shortest time possible. The first one circle will be labeled as sexual desire. Okay? Every human being has what is called sensual desire that becomes sexual desire as he grows up. And he or she grows up, or they grow up. It's important to know that this sexual desire first results in what is called sexual identity. Who am I? Am I homosexual, as they say? Am I a bisexual? Am I asexual? Am I attracted to animals? For example, like I said, the Kinsey survey says 8% of the American males were having sex with animals, mostly farm animals, I think. So we have what is called the sexual identity. But then there's another one. As you are a social being, sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Are you attracted as a man, cis male, to another male? Are you attracted to a cis female? Are you attracted to a third gender, as we say in India, that is trans? Are you attracted to trans men? Are you attracted to trans women? Who exactly are you attracted to? That sexual orientation. And the fourth one is called sexual behavior. Now, who do you have sex with? Now, everybody you know, in India, a majority of the gay men are married to women, which means that they are having heterosexual sex. So they are trapped in a heteronormative paradigm, as we could call it. And that's because of social pressures. So sexual behavior, sexual orientation, sexual identity, and sexual desire, these are the four spheres in which we work. Now, if you were to draw a circle within these four spheres, that's where gender expression comes in. You know, gender is a performative, it's a social construct. Who am I? Am I a woman? Am I a man? Am I a cis male, cis female? How do I express myself in the society around me? And this has been a matter of great. This, for example, a lot of UN documents cannot be translated into many languages in Europe itself, in German, in French. They have no specific word for gender. And in India, we are having a huge problem. It started as samajik laingikta, which means social sexuality. And now it's come to ling bhav, you know, expression your sexuality or your orientation. It's very interesting. It's still being played around with. The Indian languages, they're using ling bhav, they're using samajik laingikta. So it's not yet determined, but we do know that it's a performative and not something that is ingrained in you. It grows, you know, you become and decide that you are in the wrong body. And then that journey starts. It's a very, very difficult journey for trans people. Let me tell you that. And I've known quite a few. Shall we say gender now? The World Health Organization recognizes 26 genders. So you can imagine how complicated it is. Even the pronouns that you use for trans, you have to be extremely careful. If for trans men you use the word he, they may object. You may have to say they. They have you expect them to label themselves and come on the table. So that is an easier way because it's a self-expression, and you have a right to self-express your gender. That's it. I hope that's short and precise to some extent. But I could go
Absolutely.
on and on. Yeah, thank you, Abhi. I know you could have a lot of differences with me, but please do accept what I've said at the moment as a primer for the students. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Absolutely. I agree. I was wondering if you could see me
No, I
through
can't.
the blank
I can't.
screen. And I was like,
I can't.
okay, great.
I like to
Uh,
see you, but I can't. Anyway.
sure.
Yeah.
Definitely, Mr. Kavi, I'll definitely get in touch with you after the
Yeah.
call for sure.
Yeah.
We'll be
Please.
in touch. I would definitely give my perspective, but before that, a few important questions. And the next question would be to Mr. Grover.
Anand is my
Illegal.
name. Anand.
Sorry?
No fun.
Anand, yeah, definitely to Anand. So, Anand, many thinkers have attributed the existence of 377 to the colonial rule in India. If that indeed was the case, then why did it take us over 65 years to repeal that law?
Oh, well, it's absolutely true that 377 is of British origin. And it was, let me say, forced upon us, not bestowed, but forced upon the Indian nation. And India was a huge nation, and then to the whole of the Commonwealth by the British. And it actually brought with it all the ethos of Britain on alternative sexuality. I didn't want to say homosexuality alone. Basically, according to them, it was a cardinal sin to have any kind of non heterosexual sex. And the 150 years that has passed after passing of the Indian Penal Code and enacting it and making it applicable law has meant that Indians have imbibed that kind of ethos. So, in fact, I can tell you that when we had started the petition, one of the first debates was with Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, who's a minister now in the present government. And we were being interviewed by Karan Thapar. And those were early days. And everybody thought that we were mad even to think of challenging it. And I think Ashok will remember the early days because he was
Yes.
one of the only persons within the gay community. And I must pay my respects to him for that he was willing to be coming forward to be a petitioner. But that could not happen because we thought a Delhi person would be required for a Delhi petition. But be that as it may, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad very boldly and very confidently told Mr. Karan Thapar that there will be no change in the law uh, because what the law epitomized was what was the Indian ethos. So let me tell you that people in all political parties imbibed what the British brought in by that law. They had forgotten, as Ashok just reminded us earlier on, that in our country before the British, even in the Mughal period, the early periods, ancient India, we did not criminalize any kind of alternative sexual activities. They may have been frowned upon in certain portions of India, but there was no criminalization of it at all. And the British were the first one to do it. And it was based on the idea that sex is for begetting children and there is no pleasure in sex. Now, how many people want to contradict me on that? I hope everybody.
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 Because sex is primarily for pleasure, and as a consequence, it actually begets children. In fact, the urge and the pleasure are so intertwined to preserve the human race. Sex has to be made pleasurable. If there is such thing as a God, I think it is or she or a transgender God, or any other gender god, that person did the right thing in making it pleasurable. So I want to just tell you that we imbibed not only the ethos but the discrimination and stigma attached to it. Prior to 1861, prior to British formal rule in India, uh, all alternative sexualities were actually visibly seen, and Indians did not actually discriminate against them. Because even in religious formations, you see depictions of that and epitomes of that in across Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. It's an accepted thing that even a god can change the gender. I'm not using his gender. Can change the gender, born as one, change it during lifetime, etc., etc. You know the drill. So for us, it has never been an issue, but it was brought in by the British and high priests of Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism imbibed that culture, and that is why it was very difficult to challenge it. And in fact, let me tell you, the discrimination stigma was so strong that, as I told you earlier, when we were hunting for a petitioner in Delhi, we could not get an openly alternative sexuality gender person, a gay man or a lesbian woman or a transgender person or intersex or what have you. We could not get a person to file a petition because nobody wanted to come out in the open. That was the sense of fear. And please remember and recollect. You all of you are young, probably in your 19s or 20s, but just in 2001, there was a raid in Lucknow in the NAS Foundation International, as opposed to NAS Foundation India, uh, because they were promoting safer sex amongst gay men, men having sex with men, which is the euphemism expression used, transgender persons, to use condoms, go in the parks, make sure that people actually understand that you can actually get HIV through sex, unsafe sex, unprotected sex, and condom usage is very important. And of course, leaflets around that. And that was seen by the police in Lucknow as indulging in gay sex, which was frowned upon. And so they raided, seized, and the case is still going on. And Arif Jafar and the other people had to spend 49 days in jail. And then I had to go to Lucknow and get them released on bail. So the prejudice and the stigma has been very strong. I have to always admire Ashok. He has been there out in the open right from the beginning, as far as I know. Very few people have been like that. And it's good to see people like him as models of, people who are able to carry on their sexuality in the open, make people understand what it is all about, and be proud of their sexuality, gender, etc. This is the type of role models we need now for the future battles that we are going to talk about. I wish we had them earlier, but even if it was late, it was okay and it was welcome. So I hope I've answered you. But I would like to see you, Abhi. I mean, it's very tough to talk to a person who's just not there. And normal human behavior wants that we see you. You may not want to make yourself publicly known, but
Yeah,
after the public thing is open or closed down, rather, I would like to see
Yes,
you so that if I ever meet you,
absolutely, Anand.
I would know
Absolutely.
that. I think
yes.
you're depriving us of the pleasure of seeing
I,
you.
I was about
No,
to
no.
say that. It's that
Yeah,
you know
that's
the
that's
the
that's
human.
intentional, and as part of people who have been part of the struggle of our community, I mean, you'll understand that
No, I respect
still
your
will be
privacy,
bias here. Yeah,
but but I would
no,
like to see you later on.
Abhi, although I may not be a trans.
Hmm.
Don't say I'm not part of you. I'm also part of your community.
oh, no, I exactly said that as part of the community for
Yes.
sure. Absolutely, I'm including everyone, like not
Okay.
just our community, but of course allies like Mr. Grover, like Anand, like and all the young kids from
Yeah.
Macula and Parley projects. All
Right.
these kids are part of our struggle
Good.
for sure. So yes, and definitely Anand, post call, and once the YouTube thing shuts down, I'll definitely switch on my camera, for
Thank
sure.
you.
Okay.
Okay, so my next question actually can have both legal and community perspective. So I would like both the panelists to answer it. In India, the LGBTQ representation at bureaucratic and political level is symbolic to say the least. So, what do you guys suggest can be done to resolve this?
The
Ashok,
represent.
you want to start first?
You start,
Okay.
Anand, then I'll give the community.
Well, in an ideal society, we should have representation of every community, religion, ethnic group, sexuality groups, what have you. We are not in an ideal world. We live in a very divided, unequal society. And that's true for most societies. I don't see India as being an exception. But historically, for various reasons, we have much more baggage to carry on sexuality, on caste, on sex, gender, etc. And we try to change that through our constitution. So our preamble talks very much of equality, fraternity, and equality is one of the most non-derogable entitlements, equality and anti-discrimination. So to see that all sexuality minority groups are represented not only in the bureaucracy but in echelons of power which are outside the state also. The state wields one power which is very powerful. So therefore, um, there has always been reservations for certain communities who are historically oppressed, like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, as well as other backward classes or castes. Uh, so now the time has come, in my opinion, that we have an equality law which transcends one, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. Because equality law or equality provisions are only in the constitution, article 14, 15 and 16. 14 being the overarching principle, 15 being discrimination, and 16 being equality and no discrimination in public employment. But in the private sector, if I am like Lawyers Collective or Humsafar, or you may be Cipla, or you may be Unilever, if they discriminate, if I, as Lawyers Collective, discriminate against, say, a transsexual person or against a scheduled caste person, there is no recourse in law because there's no anti discrimination law which applies to a private sector. So that is why it is very important that now is the time to talk about equality. We did that partly in the HIV Act. In the HIV Act, there is an anti discrimination provision which applies equally to the private sector. So if I'm applying for the job in the public sector, I can actually get it on the basis of Article 14, 15, and 16, the equality and anti-discrimination clauses. But if I'm and that's exactly what happened in the case of MX versus ZY, where the Bombay High Court said if a person is actually HIV positive and he's qualified and does not pose a substantial risk of transmission, he has to be employed. Similarly, we need to get an equality anti-discrimination law, which is which is very similar to the English law now. It is across all headings or grounds of discrimination. Discrimination. It may be gender, sex, caste, whatever. Applying it to the private sector. But in the public sector, you don't have to change the law in a sense because Article 14 is overarching as is 15. And that's why in the Navte Johar judgment, they have said that it applies across the board. So today, 14, 15, 16, 19, and 21 have been read to include gender. Sex has been included to mean gender. And gender means a very
And sexuality.
and sexuality, gender. It's a very broad term.
Yeah.
So the Constitution doesn't need an amendment, but we certainly need. For that, the issue that would arise is this. If I want to say that I'm a gay man or I'm a transsexual man or I'm an intersex person, then I will have to declare that, and I will have to be in the open and say, I demand that as a right, not to change the law, but also uh, if I'm applying in that category and there's a reserved category. So you'll have to have horizontal reservations like disability. The Persons with Disability Act is not a constitutional measure, but it gives reservation in the public sector for persons with disability. So we need a similar, not disability law, but we need an equality and anti-discrimination law, which is all embracing, from sex to disability to caste to sexuality minorities, which would be, also applicable to the private sector. So, and for that, the question is, how do we go about it? Now, 377 was rid of because we were very determined to get it out of the Indian statute book. But now the community is really well organized. They are demanding this. So now we have to forge links with all people who want equality. The problem is that everybody doesn't agree with each other. But that is a challenge. Today, you will not be able to have a law only on rights of sexuality minorities for equality. You will have to have an all embracing law. And there the question will come, can you have reservations or could you just have anti discrimination? So there are two options. Like, you cannot be discriminated on the ground of being transgender or LGBTQI community if you are uh, such a person belonging to such a community, then you cannot be discriminated against. But that will not allow for a proportional representation of those community members within the echelons of power. They may be private sector or in the government sector. For that, you need reservations, which people don't like. Some people frown upon that. But that is one of the only ways to make sure that there is proportional representation of all communities. So we have to think about this, have open debates about them. Don't worry about differences, because differences are bound to be there. We have a historic uh, experience on caste, tribes, other backward classes, disability. Now we have to move forward and include other groups which are discriminated against historically. So the way is to set up a campaign for that where all people who are in that are involved. And of course, I'm sure Home Safar, Ashok Row Kavi, and I would definitely be willing to take part in that. Thank you.
Uh, would you like my observations now?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Anand. And Ashok, yeah, if you could
Yeah,
take that.
Abhi, what Anand has talked about is this broad framework of policy changes that are necessary in the legal system and even at the sort of framework of everyday life. But I want to point out two things. One is that the Indian Constitution is the most amazing document, and it goes down to what is called individual freedom. It's all what he talked, equality before the law, 14, 15, 19, 21. They are concerned with individual freedoms of being individual in a multinational state like India, where so many people just look at the currency note and it's got, I think, 18 official languages on it. So that's one side. But if you look at the political dynamic, if you look at what how the political system is operating, you will see that it operates on what is called community mobilization. An individual can't seem to get through. It has taken someone like, say, Anand, to talk about the individual freedoms of who you are as your sexuality. It has taken from 95 onwards, when the battle started. I remember the first article on Section 377 was published in Bombay Dos in 1990. That's where I remember the battle had started, and it was by Shrikant Bhatt, who was teaching criminal law in Government Law College in Bombay. Now, what I want to say is that until what the right path that the lawyers collective took was, they did community mobilizations and community consultation. So therefore, a very broad paradigm was laid out on how we are going to carry this forward. The first thing was to get Section 377 read down. And if you look at the Delhi High Court judgment by Justice A.P. Shah, there you will find a new delineation, a definition of what is called constitutional morality. On one hand, he talked about the fact that they had talked to someone like Ravi Prasad, and he talked about the ethos of India. Now, the ethos of India, the ethics of the various groups, the way majority religion has, disciplined its people, the way minorities have tried to protect their turf. You see, all these have been cross-cutting in many ways. But what really cut through the whole process was what Justice A.P. Shah called constitutional morality. And definitions in the Delhi High Court judgment are so incredible. Like, what is personal space? What is privacy, for example? Now, you wouldn't be finding better definitions of that than in Justice A.P. Shah's, judgment on reading down Section 377. 377 was just a hoax because afterwards, the way the community reacted to it, the way it tried to put it into practice, the way hundreds of people came out of the closet, of course, to be disappointed with the Supreme Court by Justice Singhvi, who pushed tried back in the closet, but it didn't work. But there were certain things that are very interesting. The community was called a minuscule minority, okay, and that really enraged the LGBT community, and that really made this people like Anand Grover were pushed by this community mobilization to seek uh, justice in the review petition, in the curative petition. So there was a push from the community, and the community also did what is called, all the LGBT communities reached out into mainstream society and tried to educate this, and the level of sensitization within India on what LGBT communities are. You could see it rising not only in the social landscape, but in the social consciousness. Now, I'm not talking of just of the movies, but you could see fantastic theater of dance, drama that took place between Justice Shah's judgment, 2009, right, Anand? 2009, and yeah, and 2015, I think.
13, 11, 12,
Yeah,
13.
that is Justice Singhvi's. So you must realize that there was some sort of interaction between communities who started becoming visible, and this means all communities. I know the trans community was sorting out its own problems that time, and it was again Anand who took up the cause and got the Nalsa judgment on board. But the point was very simply this, that if it wasn't for the fact that Justice A.P. Shah and Anand that time brought us out, dragged us out into the public sphere, and these communities then reached out in a very big way. Practically, even today, every 6 months, an LGBT organization is technically registered as a not for profit charity in India. You can imagine how many LGBT organizations are coming up compared to what is happening all around us. But the point I'm trying to make is that it was some sort of symbiotic relationship between the LGBT communities, mainstream society, and the legal system. And all three together are really the reason why the final judgment was so progressive. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, my next question is either of you can answer that. Like Anand can give us the legal perspective, and Ashok can tell us more about from the community perspective. So here is the thing that most of the Indians we grow up with an objective concept of a family, which is marriage and then kids. In fact, I would like to tell you here in Canada, at the kindergarten level, kids are taught parents do not mean mama papa. They also mean mama mama and papa papa. So this kind of teaching normalizes the whole concept in a child's mind, and it also sort of becomes a stepping stone for a more inclusive and equal society. How far are we from such education equalization? Ashok, if you could take that, and
No,
Anand
I
can
don't know.
tell us how far are we from the legalization of same-sex marriages and adoption by the community individuals?
First of all, I would advise you all to do some reading about the subject in India. For example, Ruth Vanita has written this incredible book called Same Sex Rights in India, which describes how chosen families, uh, the people you choose to call your family, have been there at a subterranean level, are always there and yet not being seen to be normative. But they've been there for hundreds of years. And someone like Premchand has written about them. They have been written in various regional languages. The Tritiya Panthis, for example, trans women, the Hijras, what I call the Gharanas, they're type of families. They're chosen families. I remember the meeting one of the oldest Hijra gurus of Delhi. And when I was UNAIDS officer for HIV/AIDS programs, and I tried to get 30 of the most senior leaders of Hijras together so that we could come out with certain, laws that NACO would follow regarding targeted interventions in that community. And I remember this senior Hijra was surprisingly from Kerala, some, and she was from near the Red Fort, and she was nearly 64 that time. So I don't know, I have not maintained touch with her, but I remember the horrifying story she gave me. When she was 12 years old, her mother came and woke her up at night and said, see, your elder sister is going to get married next month, and we don't want somebody like you, a feminine boy, destroying our reputation. So here's some money I've kept for you, and I want you to get out of the house before sunrise. And this was at 4 in the morning. And that child is asked to get out of the house by the mother herself. And imagine that child finds her way to Bangalore and roams the streets till she finds a Hijra group begging. And she goes and joins them. And that from there, she told me stories that of terrible sexual exploitation, sexual violence, and how she finally managed to come to Delhi and find the grow a chosen family. She's so highly respected in Delhi as a guru, having more than 700 hijras and under her, who are all her chelas, which means her daughters. And she never forgot her natal family. She used to send money to all her brothers, to her sisters. And one day, she decided to go back to Kerala and meet them. And they shut the door on her. So she went to the local temple. She said goodbye by giving a donation to the deity and came back to Delhi. I remember I was crying in the bus. But the chosen families are so much more solid. If I know lesbian couples in Bombay who have been together for 30 years, and these same-sex, these laws, the tenancy laws, nothing applies to them. If anything happened to the older woman, the younger woman will just be thrown out of that residential accommodation because under the Bombay Tenancy Act, only her blood relatives can, become inheritors of that flat. So you see, a lot of things have happened in India are happening. I always have a saying which I tell foreigners: anything that has to happen in the world will happen in India too, first, So I'm very proud of this country, the civilization. We've had a bad time, colonization for hundreds of years, but will get there because the people, various sections of the people, are mobilizing and rising and doing what they think is right, ethically right.
Absolutely. Fabulous, Ashok. Thank you. So, Anand, legal perspective, legally speaking, how far are we from legalization of the same-sex marriages and adoption from our community folks?
Abhi, it seems a very attractive question, but you are as far from it as you want to make it.
Mhm.
If you are determined
Thank you.
to change it,
Mm.
then you are near as you want to be. So
Mm.
we were very near in 2001, but it took us 20 years. So the challenge is to say we want it because we deserve it. Of course, it's the choice of a person whether they want marriage. There's a whole system of not having marriage at all. It's up to the person. If the person wants to get married, they should have the right to get married and the choice to do so. Now, recognition of marriage is one thing, and having a law which would recognize is another thing. Like in some personal laws, religious laws on marriage are personal laws. So traditional laws apply, like the Hindu law, which is now uh, in the Hindu Marriage Act, or the Shariat, or the Parsi Marriage Act, or the Christian Act. So these laws actually recognize certain marriages. It's quite possible that you can get that by a decision of the court. If the court were to interpret that a marriage between two persons is legal, it's possible to do that. But in other issues like adoption, where you need to change the law because it's purely statutory, or inheritance, there you have to change the law. So you have to work both at the court judicial level, that is, take recourse to the courts. There are some petitions filed. There's a petition in Kerala for recognition of a transgender couple or a transgender person and a non-transgender person. But I think that's possible as one of the recourses. But surprisingly, people haven't come forth and demanded it. That's what I find a bit surprising. And also, there are people who have got married abroad where their marriage, say, two gay men, including very well known people, and their marriage is perfectly legal in, say, Canada or in France or in the US in some states. But
Right.
when they are here, they don't want to test it. Those are ideal people to test it. So I have already advised people that it's possible to test that, and you don't have the ignominy of 377 hanging on your head. So that is one. But at the legislature level, also you need to make changes. You need to make changes and talk to all political parties, the ruling parties and the opposition, and the ruling parties in the states, to tell them that this has to be done. See, now we are in a different world. You can talk about transgender persons. Hijras are a welcome. It's a very ironic and, sometimes I feel hypocritical. Hijras we have always been talking about, but there is not a good change in the law as we will discuss later. Whereas about gay men, there was no talk going on within the parliament, and one of the bills by Shashi Tharoor was rejected. But then we changed the law through a court process. So I think we don't ask the question how long will it take. We say that we want this change and we are determined to get it. And I tell you, the support you will get from the ordinary community, so-called non-LGBTQI community, will be stupendous. I'll just give you one example of how change occurred. I remember when we were debating this during the course of the 377 journey on television, a lot of the religious personalities would come, and Muslim and Christian personalities would say, no, 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 we are not really against gay men, but we are really against, marriage. We are not in favor of criminalization. That was the argument. At the end, they changed. Originally, they were against, even changing 377. So they wanted criminalization. But at the end of it, they supported the decriminalization. But I would tell them, so you people who are always advocating sex within marriage, for gay men, you are actually being hypocritical and advocating sex outside marriage. That's not acceptable. If they want to get married, why should they not get married? So, so the thing is, there are lots of openings that you have, and you can use these things. And I can tell you, it'll be difficult over this coming decade to deny the right to marry to those who want to get married.
I like to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Ashok, why haven't you filed a petition?
no,
Ashok,
I've got three husbands. Who should I marry? The point is,
I don't know whether you'll be allowed to have three husbands. That we can't
no,
argue.
if a Muslim man can have four wives, why can't A
So
Hindu
you have
man
to do
has three husbands.
a two-step thing. One,
Okay,
first recognize marriage, and then have you can have you know
wait, listen.
have
Anand, when I loved it when you said it's as near as you want, or it has never.
Yes.
There is low hanging fruit. That's the lovely part about India. You have something called the Special Marriages Act, where it's a secular law where a man and a woman can go and get legally married in a court. Now, the only thing is it's genderized. The Special Marriages Act only accepts between a man and a woman as being married under the Special Marriages Act. Now, if you fight for removing the gender bias, if you say that it should be between any two consenting adults, you have actually, reformulated the Special Marriages Act to suit us. I think there are many laws like that. I know lesbians, for example, who have adopted their, say, a slum kid or their maid's kid as and bring them up, and they have such Herculean problems of going to school to register the child's admission, and then the principal says, "Where's the father?" It's not just the laws that will have to change, Anand. There will have to be social changes too, and dramatic changes too, where we have to fight every step of the way. I have a woman who actually is fighting an incredible battle for a young son who's just about 12, who insists on wearing the girls' uniform, and he insists on going to a girls' school. He will not go to a boys' school. So she's got a wig for him. She's getting him to slowly grow his hair, and she allows him to wear not allows. She's actually got a girl's uniform made for him. It's a fight on all sides, every front. We're fighting on every front, LGBT, and we are. It's an inch by inch practically battle, the battle that is being fought on so many fronts. So I think I am catching hold of what Anand said. That is as near as you want, and as it could be further. For example, I'm at the moment living alone, but I have three intimate, significant others. One is a very violent, in a way, Shiv Sena guy, who completely gay, but he's incredible. He's one of the best husbands I've had. Looks after the house, is a fabulous cook, everything. The other two are army fellows, so I never see them. They're either they come in for flying for about 2 or 3 days in a month, if they are allowed, to get away from the front. They're fighting battles on all the frontiers. So the point is, are these marriages? To me, they are. To them, they are. But the point is, gay marriages are amazing. These marriages between in the sexual minorities are amazing. They're based on the only cement, and that's love. We don't really are recognized in law. We are not recognized. We can't go to social functions together. We can't even display ourselves, even in where we live, in the buildings that we are. But the fact is that love keeps us together, and that, I think, is a better form of explaining what marriage is all about. I know, for example, it's important to be married if you want Mediclaim, if you want the pension. If all these are heterosexist little low hanging fruit that they've got, which we would also like to get at. Who wouldn't like a pension if, say, three of my husbands just drop dead? Now I'll get three pensions. The point is that we need all these laws, and
Absolutely.
that's why we need to be married.
Mm.
I'm afraid, for example, in the case of a famous what you say, designer, clothes designer, and he was married to his French lover, and the marriage took place in the French embassy in Delhi. The interesting part is, I asked him, "You were together for 15 years. What's this marriage about?" And he said, "Do you know that if I'm not legally married to him, he's got a flat in Paris, which is worth a fortune. It might go to his brother."
Mm.
It's interesting. Why you need a marriage, because there is a whole embroidery that has
Correct.
gone around it. To cut a matter short, we need marriage, because if everybody is right to get married, then I want to get married too, to all my three husbands. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, Ashok. Yeah.
I'm really sorry to intervene. Thank you so much, Ashok sir and Anand sir, for your perspective. Abhi sir, could we have your perspective as a trans man on this? Because I think it's extremely important that even that side comes out in front of the audience. If you could share that with us, if possible.
Oh, absolutely,
Thank you
Saharsh.
so much. Really sorry to disturb you. Thank you so
No,
much.
no, absolutely not. In fact, I welcome this question. Initially, when Macula got in touch with me, they wanted me to come as a panelist to give the trans men perspective. But then you guys said that if you could moderate as well, somebody from the community moderates, that's even better. The sensitivity levels rise and the questions are more in sync. So I agreed, yes. And thank you so much for asking this question, Saharsh. In LGBT, I think tea is something which is not much emphasized upon because of several reasons. The thing is that in our community, let me tell you first a little bit about the trans community, about trans men and trans women, so that why we would like to sort of not come out so much as our other community folks will be clearer to you. See, for trans people, what happens is the general perspective is transgenders, which is actually kinners and hijra community in India, joktas, and all other guys who are there. This is the picture that we get when we talk about transgenders. That's what people think. But there's actually another aspect altogether, which is trans men and trans women. So what happens with us is that we are born in a particular biological body, which is our biological sex, the genitalia between the legs, but our gender is completely different from that, which is between the mind. Like, for example, I'll give you my example. I'm born in a female body, but I can't think of a moment in my cognizant life where I ever thought of myself as a female. I always thought myself as a male, and my dream was to one day, it never is a dream for anyone. In fact, people want to avoid it at any cost. But it was my dream to go under the knife and, get my body in sync with the gender that I have in my mind. So that's what happens with a lot of people in our community. And to tell you that, when a lot of people say that, why, I mean, fine, like my family told me, we accept you for who you are, we love you, we accept your life partner or the girlfriend or whoever you have right now. Why do you have to get the surgery done? It is not cosmetic, it is not artificial, it is a saving surgery. It actually saves lives, because one of the biggest killers of trans community is dysphoria. Is like, that you experience, that you feel when your body is not in sync, with your gender in your mind. It's difficult, to say the least. It's an understatement to say that it's very difficult to live such a way. For example, I'll give you a quick example to sort of make you understand better the kind of struggles that we have on day-to-day basis. Like, for other folks from the community, no problem with the body. With us, the biggest problem is with our bodies. For example, I started dating women, I had girlfriends, and whenever I take them out to a restaurant, I would just, like, initially what happened was that the wait staff will come and they'll be like, when they're asking for the orders, and they'll be like, "Are you ready, ma'am?" And the moment I would hear "ma'am," I want to melt into a pool of water and disappear. That's what I want. So then what I started doing was to, as soon as we enter the restaurant, I'll go to the wait staff, give him some money, and instruct him to be gender neutral, or at least not say "ma'am," because I will be there with a girl who I am romantically interested in. So these are the struggles that we face on daily basis, and that's the reason why a lot of people who can afford from our community go under the knife, get their bodies changed. It's not the same. It's not the same without changing the body. Like, the struggle continues. So Yes, I mean, that's a perspective that I want to give. Like sensitivity to our community it will go a long way. Like Mr. Kavi was saying, like Ashok was saying. I'm sorry, a little while ago. um, it's always sort of recommended that whenever you see someone who is not who's looking a little and I have my hands in the air, not normal, not dressed the way or dressed the way you would expect them to be dressed. It's always sort of recommended to go and ask them what preferred pronouns they will have. Like, for example, when Raghav got in touch with me, he called me ma'am. And then I told him that please do not call me ma'am. And also use male pronouns for me. Here in Canada, we have badges. Okay. So we can wear those badges. So whenever I go out to a restaurant or somewhere, I usually have my badge on my t shirt or on my jacket that says my pronouns are he, him, and his. So no matter how I look, it's like people will use those pronouns for me. But I think we are a long way away from that, at least in India. So yeah, that's the reason why I've started working, and I am trying to create as much awareness as possible. Like this group of mine that I have just formed is called the Happy Trans Man, and I deliberately chose that name because I want people to know that yes, trans men can be happy too. We are a happy lot. There are things that make us happy. I've been doing these calls that I hold every Wednesday, and a lot of people from the community come and attend them. We're doing work related to recruitment, skill enhancement, and other things. So this is it. This is what I want to tell. Saharsh, if there's anything else that you would like to ask me, please go ahead.
No, thank you so much. Actually, to be very honest, Raghav already informed me of your pronouns. But to be honest, I want to start the call with asking everyone's pronouns, because I think that's a conversation we need to have more and more, especially in India. It's quite at times, even in advanced level sociology classes, you don't acknowledge those concepts. Ma'am, I think Anand sir needs to leave in about 10 or 15 minutes. I think let's ask the next set of questions to sir, and then we can continue ahead. I think that makes sense. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely. So I will just quickly move to the questions that I have for Anand. Actually, one very important question, Anand, I want to ask you is that we have recently passed the Protection of Transgender Rights Act, right? As much as I am praises for the current government and establishment to finally recognize the existence and rights of the community, it's a great thing. Like, for the first time, I think it has happened in my understanding in history of independent India that a democratically elected government has thought of doing such a thing. But the law has its own pitfalls, and I have read the entire law. In fact, I've done a lot of calls on this law because there is still a lot of confusion amongst our community, trans community, about this. Almost abusive in nature is the sheer prerogative that has been given to the district magistrates in order to decide whether a person is a male or female, to issue the gender marker. uh, Considering the fact that the act doesn't even specify the surgeries that are required in order to issue the desired gender marker. The law is already in place. So, Anand, what can you do to make those concerns heard by the right people?
Well, we are right. The Transgender Act, now which is in force from 2019, has a number of pitfalls. And one of the major ones is Section 345. That's a code which requires a person who wants to take advantage of that act to be recognized as a transgender person. Remember, if you don't want discrimination, so there is an anti-discrimination clause in the act, you have to be recognized as a transgender person in the act. So you have to get a certificate from the district magistrate or DM, as I would call the person, and that um, 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 certificate is obtainable by making an application first to get as a transgender person and then to the specific gender that you want, male or female or transgender simpliciter. So there's a two-stage process. And that is actually contrary to what the NALSA judgment said, that gender should be self-identified. If I want to say that I am a woman or I am transgender hijra, that I will do it on my own. I just make a simplicity application and it should be done. And that's what happens until now, that you make an affidavit, you don't have to get surgery done, and you can actually get the gazette notification for your name as well as the gender done. But this act requires that you have to make an application to the DM. And now recently, the government actually announced rules, published the draft rules, and those rules have been another problem, because again it has a two-stage process, and there were a number of infirmities in them, and a lot of groups have made their comments on it, and we did it as Lawyers Collective with Hamsafar. Other people did it also. So we are waiting for the rules to be finalized. But there are also petitions pending in the Supreme Court which challenge these provisions. We don't know what is going to happen to it. But it's unfortunate that the government is in a hurry to pass laws without really listening to the community. And that actually creates a bigger problem. They may have a legislation passed very quickly, but at the end of it, it should help transgender persons or any other community for which the act is directed towards, or to protect their rights. So this is a major flaw in the law, that it allows the district magistrate to decide whether a person is really transgender or not. I can understand if you are going to get benefits under the law. If you're a transgender person, you may get a reservation for a job or for education. But just being transgender doesn't get you anything. Okay, that's only identification. But the second stage is more important. There, the scrutiny will be heightened. But the first stage should be a simplicity application where there should be no inquiry at all. So that is one. And the second thing is, what happens to the persons who have already got certificates? There's no clarity on that. So we have suggested that the government can issue a notification under the Act, simplicity saying that those who have already got their transgender certificates, they will be given a fresh certificate, and then they can get the second stage certificate if you want. But it's very cumbersome. It gives a huge role to the bureaucracy, the district magistrate, and I don't know how it's going to work. Also, in the second stage, there's a major issue about certificate of a psychologist, etc., subjected to medical examination, which is going to create major problems. So I think there is a need to simplify that. That's what we have done in the recommendations we have made to the rules, so that it's easier to do it. But we don't know what the government is going to accept. So let's hope that they accept a lot of the recommendations. But I think there may be a need to, already there are petitions filed challenging it, but also there may be a need to amend it in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anand. Before we let you go, just one more question, and then you can leave. Can you please highlight what are the legal remedies available to the community, the whole folks at the place of employment? Like, if there is any discrimination, what can we do?
Well, if there's discrimination, as I told you, on grounds of sexual orientation or gender or what have you, in the private sector, you can't do much, except uh, under labor laws, you can argue that you've been victimized because it must relate to your job. Suppose I'm a transgender person and I'm thrown out of the job uh, because I'm transgender. It has no relation to my work. My work is perfectly okay. So under labor jurisprudence, you can say you're victimized. But in a non-labor, non-worker status, for example, a manager in a private sector, they can't go to the industrial tribunal. They will have to go to a civil court, and they will not be allowed to argue that they've been wrongly terminated. They can only ask for compensation for notice, and that's only 3 months or 1 month. So they don't have a right to go and say that they've been discriminated and wrongly terminated. So that's a major problem. But uh, If you're being harassed on the account of your sexual orientation, then there are criminal procedures available, and you can make complaints. But in my opinion, complaints in a police station are not a remedy in respect of employment. Uh,
Can you talk in that room or somewhere else?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
You want to come here?
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So sorry, I've been disturbed by somebody. Um,
No.
So I think what we need, as I said earlier, is to have a law on equality where we deal with not only employment, education, transport, all fields of public spaces, where we say, and even private spaces. For example, can in the HIV Act, we've even said that you cannot discriminate at a particular level, but whether it will actually be applied to the family or not is another issue. In the Transgender Act, they've actually said wrongly that they can actually take a person out of the family setting because there's oppression, or not being allowed to leave. Both ways, there are problems. So what we need is a law which actually addresses discrimination and equality throughout the public spaces, employment, education, transportation, services, etc., as also some aspect of private setting, so that we can actually do a lot of good service to the sexuality minorities. The other thing is the rape law has to be changed. Transgender persons, they don't know where they fit in. Are they, is 377 applicable or not? Is 375 applicable? 375 is applicable only if you're a man raping a woman. Is a trans woman a woman under 375? It's all undecided. So transgender persons are subjected to sexual violence, and they really don't have remedies in law. So we need to change that also. Earlier, the women's group were very much opposed to getting sexuality minorities included in 375 and have a gender neutral or a slightly better amended law on sexual violence. Now there is change in their thinking. So that is another area apart from civil rights, which is about what we talked about earlier. Even in criminal remedies, I think we need to make a huge change, and especially for transgender. Because let's face it, rape is something uh, sexual violence or sexual relations without consent. It's violence. So it happens in every group, every community. The LGBTQI community are no strangers to this, and we know of so many instances. So they also should have remedies, and that is the principle of law. If there's a wrong, there has to be a remedy. Ubi just, ubi remedium. That's the principle. So with that, thank you very much. I have to leave now. Otherwise, Ashok's colleague. I have 5 minutes more, so I would like to see Abhi before I go. But I don't know whether I'll be able to do that. But it's been a real pleasure for me to be able to be with Ashok, my very old dear friend. I'm sorry he's not keeping well, but I hope he'll be there for many more interactions, because I always learn from him, like I did in this answer to the first question. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand. I would like to thank you very much for coming on the call tonight and giving us brilliant perspective about all the laws and everything. I will definitely touch base with you, Anand, and we'll have a video call of our own. I actually want to tell you a little bit about the trans community struggle and the things that we have been doing as well. And my pending my India visit, I'll definitely come and meet you. Thank you so much, Anand, for your
Thank you
your
very much.
your
Thank you,
participation.
sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. And sir has
We
been
look forward
spreading
to
his
hosting you again.
sir has been spreading his wisdom on all our platforms, and we're very grateful for his time. Thank you so much.
Anytime, anytime.
Spreading his wisdom sounds very exciting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to take off after from where he said about the new laws against discrimination. We have in this country laws against discrimination against scheduled castes and tribes, for example, which is pretty sound. It's based. I know the upper castes have been grumbling that it victimizes them, but that they just have to put up with it. I think we need an anti-discrimination law that is overarching and cuts across everything. to describe what really discrimination is going to be the issue. But discrimination that finally leads to violence, then it goes into what is called criminal law. But what I want to say is that it's not very difficult to do that. The other thing, Abhi, I want to tell you is that uh, I had suggested, and after that, I decided I'm not going to take up the transgender protection bill or any
Mhm.
issues, because I had suggested to the transgender groups to
Mhm.
put forward what is called the Transgender Commission. You see, for uh, every legislation and every law to be there, and which passes to Parliament, there are statutory bodies that track these laws. You see,
Mhm.
and like there's a backward caste commission, there's a scheduled caste commission. So therefore, there would be it would be great to have a sexual minorities commission or just a transgender commission, which would then suggest to the government what is the method of certification. Because the issues of gender are becoming more and more complicated. You know that, and I know it. So,
Sure.
for example, there is a clear gender identity called fluid gender identity. Okay.
Mm. Mhm.
Now, a fluid identified gender identified person, today he may consider himself a male,
Mm.
tomorrow as a female, day after
Yeah.
tomorrow as a trans man, whatever. Now, especially in a country where resources are being fought over so violently, the few resources we have. A simple thing like reservation in housing, the DDA housing. If you have a reservation for transgender, there are a lot of men, cis men, who would then dress up and say that they're transgender.
Mm.
I know a lot. This is an issue that will get people upset. They say, well, why would you do that? There would be, but there must be some method by which a self-policing commission decides to take matters in hand and
Mm.
says that we are a sexual minorities commission or a transgender commission, and we have these people who could be either nominated or elected or whoever on that commission, who would
Mm.
then say that at the regional level, east, west, north, south, or in each state, the board will have its own people nominated by the commission from within the community, who will decide or give this certification. And
Mm.
then it cannot be challenged because it's a statutory certification from the commission, which is self-policed. It's from the communities themselves. But I don't see transgendered communities asking for that. They're saying
Mm.
we don't want the government, we don't want this at all to interfere in this issue. You get
Mm.
what I mean? But
Yes,
then what
absolutely.
are you suggesting? Is there an alternative you have come up with? That I'm not seeing and I'm not hearing about.
Yeah.
Abhi. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I would agree with you, Ashok. Before I ask you next question, I'll say this thing. Yes, there is a lot of confusion and a lot of dilemma within the community, and also diverse views. Like, except for a few things, there are various groups, various point of views, various ideologies. So yes, I totally get what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying, but I would still like you to keep continuing supporting us.
No, there's always support, but I will never represent you because
Oh
that's
yeah,
totally, totally wrong. So
correct.
if I've said this, I've
Mm,
said this out of turn as a
mm,
concerned person from the LGBTQ community, one of
abs-
a cis gay man,
mm,
a cis male who considers himself a gay man.
correct.
I shouldn't be talking about trans because I have not been through any of those experiences,
Absolutely.
except sometimes as a drag queen at a party. That that's
Right.
again a performance. But the point is, I would suggest that all these sorry, all
Mm,
these questions should be sorted out within the community. That would
sure.
be a true self-determined woke attitude. You don't look to the state.
Mm, mm.
I think this is an analogy. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I wonder if I've made myself clear. Abhi.
You have absolutely, and in fact, I'm trying it. Like I've just recently entered the trance scene, but I'm trying my best to get people on board together, and let's see. I'm hoping that it will lead us somewhere.
Thank you. I hope so too. And good luck to you,
Yeah,
Abhi.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, just a couple of questions we'll take up quickly before we wrap up the call. It has been an incredible conversation. I think it's very enlightening for a lot of people, and a lot of people from the LGBT community have also joined in. I know for a fact, and they're listening to us on YouTube right now.
Mhm.
So,
Are there
Ashok,
any questions from the?
yeah, one more question that I want to ask you is that, like you and I understand the psychological challenges faced
Yeah.
by diverse children in the initial years with regards to understanding, accepting, and finally socially living as a diverse individual,
Mm.
right? Like you have done, like I have done, and we
Right.
know it wasn't easy. So,
Mhm.
how do you think this can be managed better in Indian society?
Uh, my God, that's a terribly difficult question because I mean, first of all, there is always a conflict of interest going on whenever you put forward anything programmatic, like a uniform civil code.
Hmm.
So that will cut across all the religious crap. Okay.
Hmm.
Very simply, I have a very, very dear Muslim friend who has a Hindu partner. Now, in more ways than one, the Muslim this partner has mentored, has loved, has got the Hindu partner with living with him and everything. And we were discussing about who is going to leave the flat to, his wealth to. And he said, Ashok, even if I make a registered will in the name of my lover, my significant other, it can be challenged by my brothers or my sister's children under Muslim personal code, the person Hanafi law,
Hmm.
Muslim property cannot go to a non-Muslim.
Wow.
The same. A personal code is now contravening a secular code. A registered will can be challenged. So there are so many such laws. For example, there are laws like if I was a Hindu and I had a Muslim lover who, I'm terminally ill, and I have given the letter of authority to him
Hmm.
to turn off the ventilator or facilitate my uh, passing to better better worlds. If and he does that, he can be held for culpable murder
Hmm.
because my brothers or my sisters can say that we were not consulted,
Hmm. Correct.
and he may not even have the right to my funeral, to come for my funeral or see my corpse, whatever. You get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's so complicated and so horrendous are some
Hmm.
of these interlinking things. You moment you say something, it'll be taken as Islamophobia. The moment someone says something, it is homophobia or Hindu hatred. All sorts of stuff is going on. I didn't know, for example, and it's quite horrifying that if you have committed suicide, if you are a confessed homosexual, or if you are a woman who has had an abortion and confessed to it, these three categories are not allowed to be buried in consecrated soil in a church.
Oh God. Hmm.
Yes, oh God is right. And many, many, many youngsters are petrified of the fact. Of course, death is a long time away.
Hmm.
Because people are bothered about life and death, the rites of passage are just so. And it's happened in a lot of places. For example, in Hindu temples, I've observed whenever there's a arti, and the arti goes round, you try to take the blessings of the flame, which has been used. Single people or people like transgender people, somehow the flame never reaches them. It never go, it's traveling all over, and they never bring it to you. So it's downright discrimination, but it's
Yes.
carried out so well that you only feel it. The person who it's meant directed to feels it.
Hmm.
But otherwise, people can say, "Who cares?" But some
Hmm.
people do. I don't give a damn. Okay, Once you're dead, you're dead. I like to be fertilizer within 1 hour and just strewn all over in some rose garden. But others that don't feel that way. They want a proper funeral rite. They want somebody to come and light their funeral rite. And it happened to me when I took my mother's ashes to Haridwar. I thought I was never going to do it. Okay, and then I went through the rites and all the Sanskrit mumbo jumbo everything, and I released the ashes into the Ganges, and suddenly I started crying. I saw the final break with mom.
Yeah.
Ashes went away, and then I said, "Oh God, it's a good thing I did this." You
Mm,
get it? It wasn't
yeah.
for me a religious ceremony, although
Mm,
it had a cover of a religious ceremony. But it
mm,
was a psychological thing that immensely it released me. Others had
mm,
this habit of talking to her all the time as if she was close by. Hi, mom. Tonight I'm going to go out and to a bar with a friend of mine. And it used to be like that, as if she's still there. The
correct.
final parting with that soul only came in Hardwar. Are you getting
Right.
how these
Mm,
work on each of us? And I'm afraid we, as I'm writing my biography and my autobiography, and the chapters are coming out not in chronological order. And
mm-hmm.
the last chapter is a very dark chapter
Mm-hmm.
because I am saying that finally LGBT rights are going to be the final frontier of human rights. But the
Mm,
real fight is going to be accepted by mainstream society,
mm,
heteronormative society. That's where our real battles are, and we are losing it.
mm,
In the sense you have these pride marches where they are abusive of Hinduism, and they
mm,
say what rainbow over the saffron. Although saffron has never said it's totally
mm,
the so-called right-wing RSS
mm,
welcomed the judgment, Supreme
mm.
Court judgment. It was
True.
the Muslim Personal Board and the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of North India, which came out with press statements against the
Mm,
judgment. Okay, and yet they're abusing Hinduism in the pride
mm,
marches. Now,
mm,
what has happened is that a lot of my straight friends
mm,
who are Hindu
mm.
say, "Screw you, we are not interested. I mean, if you're going to abuse us in a pride march, and that
Correct.
Hindus are crap and Hindus are this and Hindus are that, why should we bother to even be sympathetic?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you getting it? Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a constant battle going to straight parties where people lunge at me and say, "You're a piece of shit, you LGBT. We are willing to accept you, but why are you keeping on abusing us?"
I've faced similar concerns, Ashok, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very sorry to say that towards the end, there's going to be a Lakshman Rekha. Like, although now I'm 74, I'm also a patriarch. Okay. I'm
Mm,
also the head of an extended family of nearly 42 people and their
mm,
families. And I am trying my level best to now
mm,
bring it all together because I had left my heterosexual family behind in the sense I didn't maintain contacts with my brothers and their children and all. And I have a chosen family, gay family also. But now
mm,
suddenly I find I have to work very hard on my natal family, my born family, my brother's children, my sisters-in-law, my cousins. They wish me. They are very proud of me suddenly. But to build that up as a patriarch and to be respected there
yeah.
is going to be a much tougher task.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about, Ashok, and a
Yeah.
lot of power to you. You've been such a shining beacon of hope for the entire community. Like I felt I was thrilled when I got to know that you're going to be there along with Anand. I was like, wow, this
Oh,
is
Anand and I are a team.
yeah.
He's got, he's under this terrific delusion that I'm in love with him. Anyway, he's not my cup of tea, but he's a lovable guy. I know him and his wife for
Mm,
35 years. We fought like mad. We fight like cats and dogs, but we are
right.
thick as thieves. You see, and that's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me at
Yeah.
this webinar. I hope people are you're getting good questions in
Yeah.
YouTube. If there are any questions you want to put to me, I'm willing. I'm now here. There
Mm,
might be not another time to get.
Yes, so we do have some questions.
Oh God.
Just a couple of them. So the audience was asking about how the representation of the community is in mainstream media, especially you see Bollywood movies, and they sort of unconsciously endorse stereotypes,
Right.
Yes, they do.
right?
They do.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle that? Because media is a
See,
source of influence.
First of all, let me tell you, I was born in the film industry. My father was the first president of the Indian Motion Pictures Producers Association, and two of his films got awards, in international, the Carlo Veri Film Festival. So I know the film industry. So I'm telling you, it's very sad that four of the top film directors are gay. Okay, and you get no help from them. They are absolutely homophobic. Now they're of course coming out with Kapoor and Sons and stuff, films like that. But it's still a peep out of the window, and the stereotypes are still on. Okay, so in the mainstream, in English media, it started first as Birds of Fantasy, you know, a gay guy with that funny mask and all that sort of the stereotype of the gay prides, of the weirdly dressed people, the gender fluid people who they think are gay. That's not fair too, you see. Uh, it's a tough journey, but I have got much more faith in the Hindi media, the language media. They're trying desperately to find words to Samalangik is a very very Sanskrit word. Who are we? Are we this Samalangik? Are we gay? They don't know what gay means in the Hindi or Marathi or Bengali. Uh, uh, Samakami. What are the names at the ground level they should use for us? I still remember that I and Bombay's most famous hairstylist, and he's wonderful. He's from a royal family too. And we were passing by a street in Mamad Ali Road, which is a very crowded Muslim area. And one of the guys, because my friend swishes a lot. I'm not very swish or anything. Nor am I very, stiff and macho. So we were passing, and one of the very handsome guys started calling out to us and saying, a good, you know, good in Urdu and street language is gay. Okay, good means, of course, jaggery, but he was calling us good in that sense as gay. So, of course,
mm.
my friend he had a fabulous sense of humor. He turned on and said, Nahi, good nahi, very, very good bolo. So you see, we are challenging. The community is challenging mainstream society. I don't know. Mainstream society is not very sure of where we fit in. We are not sure how we have to engage with them. But I'm not sure that you can engage by abusing the majority, the minority, or anybody. Okay, we need to engage with every section of society. We need to tell them who we are. We need to tell them that we deserve respect and we respect them. We do not respect anything that is disrespectful of others, you know.
Mm.
These are very, very difficult tasks to go ahead. So
Mm.
the film industry is part of the Indian media performative industry. And like, for example, the same thing is happening on the stage. You're getting wonderful, wonderful plays about gay men. There are very sensitive Marathi films about gay people coming up, about gender, it's incredible what is happening in India. It's a turbulence, it's massive turbulence. And I think good will come out of it. I know a lot of us have been burnt, a lot of us have been abused for who we are. For example, people now suddenly think I've started Rainbow Hindus because it's a parochial and chauvinistic thing. But it's a very simple thing that even, for example, death, whenever somebody dies, the Western attitude, Abhi, is rest in peace, correct?
Mm. Mhm.
But
Correct.
but in Hinduism, it's not. You go to another world, another life. So we've had to have something called Om Shanti, you know.
Yeah.
So
Right.
now Hindu rainbows find that even counseling for Hindus is different. A lot of Hindus are not afraid of death as such. They're afraid of who will do their last rites. Whether I'll be there when mom dies to do her last rite, if as a gay man, will I be prevented? I had a transgendered woman saying that, do you think they'll allow me to light my father's funeral pyre? Only a man can do it. You see, there are other issues coming up, which I was surprised mainstream society and other counseling services were not able to do. So I've taken that heavy job up, and surprisingly, I'm getting an incredible amount of response. Within a year of the Rainbow Hindus announcement, we've got more than 180 members now, and they're pretty good stalwarts from the LGBT community. So with that,
So we have a few, just one last question that's been very popular on the live audience. And
If I can
sure.
Just a couple of things that I want to add to what Ashok was saying about the mainstream media. Quickly, 2 points. One, I want to say that even for the platforms, the web-based platforms, for example, YouTube or TikTok and everything, we need a certain amount of censorship, because there are people with millions of followers. For example, I have no problems, no qualms in taking names. There's a guy called Carrie Minati who openly makes fun of LGBT community, and his videos are horrifying. The way he caricatures, the way he uses abusive language, and then it's so disheartening to see a million like or 2 million likes and people supporting what he's saying. So there is a certain amount of censorship which is required on web-based platforms as well. I would like to say that. Yeah.
Abhi, please realize that uh, in physics, there's something called thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. Okay.
Correct.
Hindu civilization has gone through a lot of turbulent times. Okay. Now, for example, the shrine at Sabarimala, where the women wanted to come in, it is the shrine of Hariharaputra, a
Correct.
a god born of a sexual relationship between Hari, that is Shiva, Vishnu, and Hara, that is Shiva. So two male gods. It's definitely a, a homosexual shrine. It's a queer god shrine, and it has a history of queerness, just as there's a history of queer women's temples. Okay. Now the point is, it was all overruled, and suddenly the Supreme Court said women have a right to go there anytime. It did not say that no women were allowed. The God did not want women who were having heterosexual relationships, and the proxy for that was women who menstruate. Are you getting it? The gods Ayappa was not against women entering Islam. He was against women who were having sex with men, and men who, when they had to say that they would not have sex with a woman for 1 month before they visited that shrine, and they're to live together. What that meant was, you can't have sex with a woman, but you can have sex with a man. For 1 month, all the men had to live together, and they had to go together to the shrine. So it was a queer shrine. How did it get so secularized that within suddenly, with a Supreme Court judgment, you brushed it all away and said women can just go? Are you now? The orthodoxy doesn't know the terminology of sophisticated sex, sexuality, and gender to explain to the judges. If I was there, I would have explained that leave it alone. He's not against women. He's against certain type a virgin, that little girls, 8-year-old girls are allowed, okay? Because they're not married, they don't have sex, hopefully. And women after menstruation in most societies are supposed to be not in the reproductive age, okay? So they could visit the shrine. So during that particular period, otherwise they were allowed, and all women were allowed. How did it suddenly become an issue, and the whole queer history was brushed under the carpet during the Supreme Court judgment? That shows that there is a disrespect for certain Hindu views about sex, sexuality, gender, which I want to put on the table to you. So, if you want someone like TikTok and all that nonsense to be stopped. You need to also go and sensitize the majority who has accepted so many of these traditions. That look, this is what has happened if you've accepted Ayappa, you've accepted Ardhanareshwara, you've accepted the fact that in the Minakshi temple only hijras at certain times can do worship. Then why is this TikTok nonsense going on?
Correct.
Where they're making fun of us? Is this respect for your own kind? For your LGBT, we are LGBT, and I will maintain that. But does that mean I should be disrespected by this ass? I'm not going to take it. You get what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think that it's a multifaceted fight. It's not an easy fight, and it's not. Sometimes the fight is not even secular. You have to go into the sacred and the profane. We are all together on this in this fight. Does that
Absolutely.
answer your question? Uh, Abhi, I'm asking.
Yes, yes, it does. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you are asking.
So,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Ashok sir and Abhi sir, for that. And to be honest, we just following on the lines of how a lot of times queer history in a lot of literature is just scraped off and not considered as valid and amended to propagate to the masses. We have a question that talks about the impact of literature and artists, both contemporary and old artists, of on LGBT culture, because as you said, a lot of times queer culture is not considered. It's people forget about it. So, what does the impact literature and art play in the movement itself?
I think there's an interplay all the time. Whenever, for example, a gay play or a themed play with gender issues. There's about tamasha, the growth of the Marathi art form called tamasha. There was a play and beautiful performances there, and there were elements of queerness which we could identify. Now that sort of interplay between sexuality, gender, and all is happening all the time, and it's happening on a larger and larger scale. And I think it will happen more often. And as, for example, online platforms come on, a lot of films, short films, you guys are going to shouldn't miss Kashish Film Festival that is happening in Bombay as a virtual film festival. Unfortunately, it's virtual, but when it happens as a real, meeting place for this, you see an amazing variety of sexualities, men, women, hugging each other, and it's a fabulous place where all the films on sexuality, gender have something to inform you. And so many straight friends of mine say that they have learned a lot every time they come for a film festival like that. I wish to promote Kashish with you all, and I hope it happens soon. Yeah, it's happening in June, I think. July, so it's fine. Okay.
Abhi sir, your 2 cents on the
Thank you, Abhi.
literature and the role literature and art plays in the movement.
Oh, it's very, very, very important. I agree with Ashok completely, and I think even though I was listening to him when he was talking, even though the top filmmakers in the Hindi film industry are from our community, but still to see that they're actually homophobes. Ashok perhaps has had personal interactions with them, and he knows it better. It's quite unfortunate and very disheartening to see. But if you look at it, like, if you look at Indian history, the LGBT is ingrained in our society. If you look at the literature, if you look at art, like, let me not even get started on Khajuraho. Like, there is like millions and millions of positions, sexual positions that are depicted in stone, that belongs to the LGBT community, to women together, to men together, and whatnot. And similarly, when you talk about the literature, in mythology, in Indian Hindu mythology, you find several references. When you talk about, in fact, there is a book by Devdutt Patnaik called Shikhandi and the Other Queer Stories. So if you go through it, like, there plenty of references that you can look at that are available for the people to see that, like Anand said in the beginning of the call, actually the whole stigma and taboo which has been associated with the entire LGBTQ community is very, very foreign. It came into our country, it creeped into our country only after the foreign rule, the colonization. Before that, it was not like that. In fact, there are a lot of other, again, I have my hands in the air, gifts of colonization that we have. So yeah, I mean that, and I agree. I mean, if you look at it, there is a lot that sort of talks about
I
the
would,
rainbow community.
I would just like to make concluding remarks, and after that, nothing. One of my first essays that came in the Penguin book of gay writing. It was a book called Yarana, edited by Professor Oshang Merchant, and my chapter is called The Contract of Silence. Please understand, Abhi, that it don't make that neat division of colonialism, which even I
Mhm.
have done. We were silenced. Ev-
Mm.
We were there throughout history. If you look back in your family history, you will
Mm.
always see an uncle or an aunt who is not married, but
Mm.
in the corner in the joint family. तुम
Correct.
तू तुम्हारी औकात समझो और वहीं रहो. So
Mm.
there have been efforts all the time at censoring us. When the Khajuraho temple was first being opened up for tourism, and the panels were shown to
Mm.
Nehru and Moraji Desai and all that. And Moraji Desai and all were horrified. They'd never, many of these Congress leaders, their great Gandhian vision was pretty pathetic. I call it proto Christianity, where all the hatred of sex is there in a Gandhi. If you read Gandhi, you'll see he's a sexophobic person. Now, Moraji Desai actually told the Ministry of Tourism that you cover all these temples, with bed sheets, white, bed sheets. Yeah, they just show the bad side of India.
Mm.
Are you getting it?
Yeah.
A lot of these things is shame within, where this is a culture that is based on shame. The culture that you are in Toronto and in the West is a culture of guilt. Why?
Mm.
You bring shame on your family. Okay, you're
Mm.
not doing your sanskaras or whatever you're supposed to be doing
Mm.
as a boy or as a girl, and you should be really ashamed of yourself. That would be the Asian way.
Right.
The Western way is guilt. They
Mm.
make you feel guilty. You're disobeying Leviticus.
Mm.
The church priest and pastor will be out there in his pulpit and saying horrible things about LGBT. You know that. So
Mm.
it's a totally different culture. They're cultural formats. And I'm looking at the Asian gay movements and the American and the European gay movements.
Mm.
They're going along two different strategies. In Asia, most of the LGBT children are the children left behind in the families.
Mm.
The children have migrated and go to what is called Christopher Street, and you go to gay area of town and set up
Mm.
your home or whatever. We can't. I had to look after my mother till she died. None of the other siblings looked after her, but I learned a lot from her. I learned how to make a rice cake. I learned how to make bamboo pickles. I learned how to make tomato chutney. None of my sister-in-laws or other brothers knows how to do that. So we are
Mm.
inheritors of tradition
Right.
in Asia, the LGBT,
Mm.
and we should
Mm.
make good use of it.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
funny that
so
you
that
mentioned it. And yeah, even in my family, I'm the one who's sort of,
there,
carrying on all the traditions.
there you are,
So-
there you are, there you are. It's a thankless job, believe me.
True.
Okay, thank you all for having me. Very much. Bye.
I
Thank you
think
so much,
Saharsh.
sir. Abhi, sir, do you wanted to do the concluding remarks? Then we'll call the session to an end. If you could
Absolutely.
do us the honor. Thank you so much, sir.
No problem. Well, this brings us to the end of our webinar today, and I would like to say that I think it's time we started looking at people as people without labels, no labels attached to them. In fact, if I could sound a little like famous Mr. King, I dream of a world where gay and trans marriages are as commonplace as cisgender marriages, where we as a community do not have to fight for a life of dignity, and there are no laws required to ensure it. Yeah, and I hope that it comes soon. Till then, it's young students from Lex Macula and the Parley Projects, folks like Ashok and Anand. I don't know if I can include myself in there, but you guys are actually our shining beacons of hope, and I extend a big thank you to all of you to take time out and be with us today to talk about these issues. Thank you.
Is that how many participants do you have now?
I'll just ask my team because that's on a YouTube live. Team,
Good
can you give me a
afternoon.
number?
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. We have been more than 110 people throughout. More than 110.
That's not bad.
Good.
And I think about close 150 plus people came, but they, because of internet issues, I think they kept going back and forth.
Okay.
So I think with this, I just want to thank all of the panel members, Ashok sir, Anand sir, who left us about 15 minutes back, and Abhi sir for all their time and all their help and just their wonderful words. A lot of their insights, to be honest, almost may give me tears. To be honest, it was just and at times just the hope that you gave us to the community, that was really inspiring, sir. And we're really grateful for that. And I think with that, we can call this session to an end.
Thank you.
We took away a lot from the session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
For the people, just one quick thing for our allies who are not from the community. If you want to get a trans man perspective, you can follow us on Instagram. It's @thehappytransman. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ashok. I'll touch base
What
with
about the YouTube link? Will it be there? The YouTube link?
We will send you the recordings.
Okay, I'd like to send it to all my UN friends.
Definitely.
Sure, sir. We'll send it to you.
Bye-bye.